Rachel Morgan had just turned 35 when she realized her marriage had grown unbearably cold. Living in Austin, Texas, she had once imagined a life filled with love, laughter, and the kind of stability every woman dreams of. Instead, her days were marked by silence, empty evenings, and a husband who was more absent than present. Victor Morgan, tall, handsome, and successful in business, had become a ghost in his own home. He was always traveling, always busy, always unreachable. What began as short business trips had turned into weeks away at a time. At first, Rachel excused it, telling herself that success required sacrifice, that Victor was working hard to provide for their family. But as the years passed, the explanations rang hollow. The warmth between them faded into routine, and the man who once charmed her now seemed like a stranger who merely shared her last name. Their 5-year-old son, Lucas, noticed the absence more than Rachel wanted to admit. Whenever Victor was home, his interactions with the boy were brief, perfunctory. A pat on the head, a distracted question about school, then back to emails or phone calls. Lucas would light up at the sound of his father's car pulling into the driveway, only to be met with the disappointment of indifference. To Rachel, it was like watching her son reach out for sunlight and only find shadows. The unease grew heavier with every passing month. Rachel suspected there was more behind Victor's late nights and constant travel. Whispers of infidelity echoed in her mind, though she could never catch him in a lie concrete enough to confront. He always had an explanation, an urgent meeting, an overseas contract, a crisis only he could fix. She wanted to believe him, but the trust that once bound them was fraying fast. Then came the trip that shattered everything. Victor left one cold February morning, saying he was flying out for a 2-week business project. He kissed Rachel on the cheek, hugged Lucas loosely, and promised to be back before the end of the month. 2 weeks passed, then 3. His phone went straight to voicemail. Texts were left unread. Rachel sat by the window at night, staring at the driveway, expecting headlights that never came. By the 3rd day of silence, dread gnawed at her. She picked up the phone and called Mark Jensen, Victor's longtime colleague and the director of the firm where Victor worked. Her voice trembled as she asked about the trip. "Mark, I can't reach Victor. He said he was away on business for the company. Do you know what's going on?" On the other end of the line, Mark's confusion was immediate and genuine. "Rachel, what trip are you talking about?" he asked. Her heart dropped. She repeated Victor's explanation, hoping she had misunderstood. But Mark's response cut like glass. "There's no project. Victor told us he was taking 2 weeks of personal leave. That's all I know." The phone slipped from Rachel's hand. Her mind spun. If Victor hadn't gone on business, where had he gone? And why would he lie so blatantly? Anger boiled up, mixing with a surge of fear so strong it made her knees weak. She wanted to believe it was just another excuse, another betrayal. But this time felt different. That evening, as the Texas sun dipped low, her phone rang again. It was Mark. His voice was hesitant, carrying the weight of news no one wants to deliver. "Rachel," he began slowly. "I didn't want to say this over the phone earlier, but I just received a call from contacts overseas." Victor was in Norway. He'd gone snowmobiling with friends on the ice. The weather had warmed unexpectedly. The ice wasn't stable. He went down. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean, went down?" Mark cleared his throat, his words careful but heavy. "The snowmobile broke through near a river channel. Rescue teams searched. But the currents there are brutal. They haven't recovered his body. The officials said there's no chance he survived." "Rachel, I'm so sorry." The world tilted beneath her. Only hours earlier she had been angry at Victor, convinced he was betraying her again. Now, she was told he was gone forever. Tears spilled down her face as she struggled to breathe. She pressed her palms against her eyes, as though shutting out the world could make it untrue. Lucas padded into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes, clutching a stuffed bear. "Mom?" "Why are you crying?" he asked in his small, innocent voice. Rachel forced herself to straighten, wiping her face quickly. "I'm not crying, sweetheart," she whispered, though her voice cracked. It's late. You should be in bed." He didn't press her. To him, his father's absence was almost ordinary. Another trip, another stretch of days without a hug or bedtime story. Rachel swallowed the lump in her throat, watching her son walk back to his room. How could she tell a 5-year-old boy that his father had been swallowed by ice thousands of miles away, that he would never come home again? When the house fell silent, Rachel sat in the dark, the phone still clutched in her hand. Her mind replayed every suspicion, every argument, every unanswered question. She hated him for the lies, for the neglect. And yet, beneath the fury, grief tore through her chest. She loved him still, and the thought that he was truly gone was unbearable. That night, Rachel Morgan crossed a threshold she could never return from. She was no longer a wife waiting for her husband to come home. She was a widow, grieving, abandoned, and left with a child who would never know his father's embrace again. The days after Victor's disappearance blurred into weeks, then months. Rachel Morgan's life in Austin became a series of quiet routines held together by sheer will. To 5-year-old Lucas, his father was simply away on business again. Rachel could not bring herself to tell him the truth. She repeated the same gentle story whenever he asked, "Daddy's working far away, but he loves you." It was easier than watching her little boy's heart shatter. Behind closed doors, however, Rachel's nights were filled with tears. She would sit at the kitchen table after Lucas had gone to sleep, staring at the stack of legal documents piled in front of her. Death certificates, insurance claims, bank forms, things she had never imagined signing at 35. Mark Jensen was the one who guided her through it all. Patient and steady, he helped her navigate the probate court, the legal declaration of Victor's presumptive death, and the endless paperwork that followed. Mark also arranged something Rachel hadn't expected, a remote position with the company. "It'll give you stability," he explained, "and the freedom to be with Lucas." She accepted gratefully. The work was simple, managing schedules, handling correspondence, updating reports. But it kept her occupied, and more importantly, it paid the bills without forcing her to leave her son in daycare from dawn until dusk. Still, no amount of paperwork or financial security could fill the void. The house felt hollow without Victor's presence, even if that presence had once been cold and distant. There were moments when Rachel resented herself for missing him at all. He had lied, withdrawn, perhaps even betrayed her. But grief was not rational. It carved its path through her heart, whether she welcomed it or not. As months turned into years, Rachel withdrew from the world. Friends invited her to dinners, to church groups, to casual outings. She declined each time, too tired to explain the heaviness that never left her chest. Suitors occasionally tried to approach her. Widows did not go unnoticed, but she brushed them off politely. She was not ready, and perhaps never would be. The thought of letting another man close felt like a betrayal, both to Victor's memory and to her own battered trust. Lucas grew, his questions about his father growing less frequent with each passing year. At first, he would ask nightly when Daddy was coming back. Rachel would tuck him in, stroke his hair, and say softly, "He's still away, sweetheart. Remember the story about him, flying over the mountains? He's there." She created small tales about Victor's travels, that he was exploring glaciers, sailing across fjords, meeting people in distant lands. Lucas clung to those stories at first, eyes wide with wonder. But slowly he stopped asking. By the time he turned 8, Victor's face had begun to fade from memory. Lucas no longer rushed to the window, hoping to see headlights in the driveway. Instead, he accepted the bedtime stories as fairy tales rather than promises. In a way, that broke Rachel's heart even more. She wanted him to remember the good parts of his father, the laughter they once shared, the few moments of warmth. But those memories were slipping, replaced by an unspoken emptiness. Rachel found herself living in two worlds. By day, she worked, cooked, cleaned, and laughed with her son. She smiled when Lucas showed her drawings, cheered at his soccer games, and helped with homework. On the surface, life looked functional, even normal. But at night, when the house was quiet, she felt the crushing weight of loneliness press in. The bed was too big, the silence too loud. She would clutch a pillow, imagining for a fleeting second that Victor might walk through the door, apologize, explain everything. Then the fantasy would collapse, leaving her in tears once more. 3 years passed in this suspended state, half alive, half grieving. Yet within the sorrow, a shift began. Rachel noticed it in small ways. The first time she laughed freely at one of Lucas's silly jokes. The day she realized she no longer cried every night. The moment she looked in the mirror and saw not just a widow, but a woman who had survived. She began to understand that life, despite its cruelty, was still moving forward. Lucas was growing taller, his smile brighter, his steps quicker. He needed her not as a grieving wife, but as a present whole mother. Rachel could not remain trapped in Victor's shadow forever. One evening, after putting Lucas to bed, she stood on the back porch, gazing at the Texas sky streaked with stars. The air was warm, cicadas humming in the distance. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to breathe deeply, to imagine a future not defined by loss. She was not ready to date, not ready to forgive, not ready to forget. But she was ready to take one step forward. The grief would always live inside her, a scar that never fully healed. Yet alongside it grew a fragile determination to build a new life for herself and her son, no matter how uncertain. Rachel Morgan was still here, and she was beginning to realize that survival, in its quiet way, was a form of strength. 3 years had passed since Victor's disappearance, and the rhythm of Rachel Morgan's life in Austin had settled into something steady, though heavy. Work, parenting, quiet nights, occasional laughter with Lucas. It was a life she had pieced together, one day at a time. But one morning, as she packed Lucas's lunch for school, she realized how small their world had become. The boy was growing fast, his questions sharper, his curiosity boundless. He deserved more than 4 walls and the echo of a mother's caution. And Rachel, though she barely admitted it to herself, needed more too. It began as a thought, fragile and almost reckless, a vacation, a chance to breathe outside the confines of grief, to see something new, to give Lucas memories untouched by sorrow. The idea terrified her. Travel had always been Victor's domain. He was the one who planned trips, who arranged tickets, who decided destinations. She had been the passenger. Now, if she went, she would have to lead. After weeks of wavering, she booked 2 tickets to Cyprus. The island had been Victor's dream destination once, a place he spoke of but never visited. Rachel chose it not to honor him, but to reclaim it. She wanted to step into a space that had belonged to their marriage and make it hers, make it Lucas's. When the day arrived, Rachel's hands trembled as she zipped their suitcases. She glanced at her son, now 8 years old, excitedly tucking his favorite book into his backpack. His joy steadied her. Maybe, just maybe, this trip could be a turning point. At Austin Bergstrom International Airport, Rachel felt both exhilarated and exposed. Families clustered at check-in counters, children squealing, couples embracing. Each scene stabbed at her heart, reminding her of what she had lost. Once, she and Victor had been that couple, that family. Now, she was a lone figure shepherding her son through security. She swallowed hard, refusing to let the comparison poison the moment. Lucas, oblivious to her turmoil, pointed at planes through the window with wide-eyed wonder. "Mom, that one's huge. Do you think it's going to Europe too?" She smiled, forcing calm into her voice. "Maybe. But ours is waiting right over there." On the plane, the hum of engines filled the cabin as passengers settled in. Rachel gripped the armrest during takeoff, nerves raw. She hadn't flown since before Victor vanished. For a brief moment, Panic surged, memories of phone calls, of Norway, of an accident in ice. But she pushed them down, focusing on Lucas's excitement. His nose was pressed against the window, his voice bright with awe. Hours into the flight, as flight attendants wheeled carts down the aisle, Lucas leaned close, whispering with the seriousness only a child could carry. "Mom, I saw Dad." Rachel blinked, heart slamming. "What do you mean?" He pointed discreetly toward a row, several seats ahead. "Over there. He's with that lady. I know it's him." Rachel's breath caught. For a second, she couldn't move. Her eyes followed his gesture, scanning the passengers. A man with dark hair sat angled toward a young woman, their heads close in conversation. From the back, yes, there was a resemblance. Broad shoulders, the tilt of his neck, even the way he rested his hand on the armrest. Her stomach twisted violently. It couldn't be. Victor was dead. Declared gone, his body unrecovered, but his fate sealed by courts and common sense. She forced herself to breathe. "Lucas," she said softly, brushing his hair back. "Sometimes our minds play tricks. You remember your dad, and maybe when you see someone who looks a little like him, you think it's him, but it's not." Lucas frowned, confusion clouding his young face, but it looked just like him. Rachel cupped his cheek, her voice gentle but firm. "I know, sweetheart, but Dad isn't here. He's not coming back." The words felt like shards in her mouth. She rarely spoke of Victor so plainly, but she needed to calm her son and herself. She leaned back in her seat, heart racing, eyes shut tight. The hum of the plane felt louder now, every creak and shuffle amplified. Was it possible? Could Lucas have really seen him? No, she told herself. This was grief, memory, and a child's imagination weaving illusions. And yet, deep inside, doubt coiled like smoke. The resort in Cyprus was everything Rachel had hoped it would be. Sunlit terraces, blue water stretching endlessly, and the gentle sound of waves crashing against the shore. It was the kind of place meant for rest, for healing. She had told herself that this trip would mark the beginning of something new, a memory carved for Lucas that was untouched by sorrow. The first evening, after settling into their room, Rachel stepped out onto the balcony while Lucas flipped through a comic book on the bed inside. The Mediterranean air was warm, laced with salt. For the first time in years, she felt something close to peace. She closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, and tried to let the sound of the sea wash away the ache that never truly left her chest. Then she heard it, a man's voice, sharp and angry, carrying upward from a terrace below. Rachel's eyes flew open. The words themselves didn't matter at first. It was the timbre, the rhythm, the force. Her blood ran cold. It sounded exactly like Victor. She froze, heart pounding. Her knuckles whitened as she gripped the balcony railing. The man was arguing with a woman. Rachel could make out only fragments, heated accusations tossed back and forth. Then came a phrase so familiar it sliced through her like a blade. "For crying out loud, will you let me finish?" Her breath caught. That was Victor's phrase. He had said it during countless arguments, petty squabbles about bills, missed dinners, forgotten anniversaries. Always the same words, delivered with the same impatience. No one else said it like him. Rachel's knees weakened. She pressed her back against the sliding glass door, trying to steady herself. Could it be possible? Was Victor truly alive, here in Cyprus of all places? The court had declared him dead. She had mourned him, grieved him, buried him in memory. And yet, below her balcony, that voice dragged her into a reality she was unprepared to face. She forced herself to look over the railing, careful not to be seen. Shadows shifted below. Two figures, their outlines lit faintly by the glow of a lamp. A man stood tall, shoulders squared, his movements abrupt as he gestured. The woman beside him crossed her arms, her tone sharp. Rachel squinted, her heart racing so loudly she feared it might give her away. She couldn't see his face. The angle was wrong, and the night concealed details. But his posture, his gestures, the rise and fall of his voice, it all matched the man she had once loved, the man she had buried in her grief. Rachel's thoughts spiraled. If this was Victor, then what had the last 3 years been? A performance? A lie? A cruel escape at the expense of his wife and son? She had cried for him, raised Lucas alone, signed papers declaring him gone. Rage simmered beneath her fear, colliding with disbelief. And yet, another voice whispered inside her, what if she was wrong? What if grief had sharpened her imagination so much that every resemblance felt like truth? She remembered Lucas on the plane, insisting he had seen his father. She had brushed it off as a child's fantasy. But now, the coincidence gnawed at her. Rachel stepped back into the room, her hands trembling as she slid the glass door shut. Lucas looked up, his smile innocent and wide. "Can we go to the pool tomorrow, Mom?" he asked. She forced her lips into a smile. "Of course," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. As he returned to his book, Rachel sat on the edge of the bed, her pulse still racing. Her mind churned with questions she could not silence. If Victor was alive, then every decision she had made in the last 3 years had been built on a lie. Her grief, her solitude, her attempts at healing, would all of it unravel in a moment? Part of her longed to know the truth, to chase down the voice until she saw the man's face. But another part recoiled, terrified of what she might discover. She had built a fragile peace for herself and for Lucas. If she confirmed that Victor lived, that fragile peace might shatter beyond repair. Rachel lay awake long after Lucas had fallen asleep, staring at the ceiling, replaying the words she had heard. "For crying out loud, will you let me finish?" The phrase echoed in her head like a haunting melody. She had lived with ghosts for 3 years. Tonight, she wondered if the ghost had flesh and blood after all. The next morning, Rachel couldn't shake the voice from her mind. All through breakfast with Lucas, her eyes drifted toward the terrace, toward the elevators, scanning faces she had no business searching for. Her son chatted happily about the pool and the buffet's pancakes, oblivious to the storm inside her. Every laugh he gave her was a reminder that she had to keep herself together. When Lucas went off to a supervised kids' activity later that afternoon, Rachel finally let herself act on the impulse that had been gnawing at her since the night before. She wandered the grounds of the hotel with feigned nonchalance, her gaze sharp, her ears tuned to every familiar cadence. Then she saw him. The man was walking across the courtyard with the same confident stride she had memorized years ago. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair flecked with strands of gray that hadn't been there before. He wore sunglasses, but even with half his face obscured, Rachel's pulse surged. She trailed him carefully, her steps slow, always keeping a safe distance. He stopped near the poolside bar to order a drink. As he turned slightly, tilting his head to speak with the bartender, the late afternoon sun caught his jawline. Rachel's breath hitched. Just below the edge of his chin was a small, distinct mole, one she had kissed countless times in another lifetime. That detail erased any lingering doubt. It was him, Victor, alive. Her stomach twisted, rage and grief colliding in waves. For 3 years, she had mourned him, cried over a body that was never recovered, explained away his absence to their son. And here he was ordering cocktails by a resort pool as though nothing had happened. Rachel forced herself to breathe evenly. She could not storm up to him, not yet. She needed certainty, confirmation from his own lips. So she circled to the far side of the bar, slipped into a seat just 2 stools away, and ordered sparkling water. She kept her gaze forward, pretending to study the menu, but her body hummed with tension. Victor was already a few drinks in. His glass clinked against the counter as he muttered to the bartender about tourists who didn't know how to tip. Rachel almost laughed bitterly. His complaints hadn't changed. After another drink, he turned slightly, his eyes hazy from alcohol, and caught sight of her. "Evening," he slurred politely, though his voice carried the edge of recognition he couldn't quite place. Rachel tilted her head, keeping her tone casual. Evening. Busy day. He chuckled, a sound so achingly familiar it made her chest tighten. Busy drinking, he admitted, lifting his glass. Not much else to do when the world won't let you forget who you are. The words struck her. Did he mean them for himself? Did he sense who sat beside him? She leaned forward just enough to hold his gaze, her voice low. Sometimes the world forgets you even when you're still here. He frowned, staring at her as though the fog in his head was trying to clear. You sound familiar, he murmured. Rachel forced a small smile, every nerve screaming. Maybe I remind you of someone. The silence stretched. He blinked slowly, then laughed without humor. Wouldn't be the first time. People see ghosts everywhere. He swirled the ice in his glass, his shoulders slumping. You lose yourself long enough, you start to wonder if anyone would even notice if you stayed lost. Rachel's throat burned. She wanted to shout, I noticed. I cried. Your son noticed. But she kept her voice even. Someone always notices, she said softly. His hand froze on the glass. For a second, their eyes locked, and the haze of alcohol couldn't disguise the flicker of unease in his. Rachel could see it. He recognized something. Maybe not fully, not yet, but enough to unsettle him. He looked away, rubbing a hand over his jaw. Strange. You remind me of, never mind. Just strange. Rachel's pulse thundered. Every word confirmed what her heart already knew. This wasn't imagination. This wasn't grief creating illusions. It was him, Victor Morgan, alive, drunk, and sitting 2 stools away as if he hadn't left her to raise their son alone. She stood abruptly, unable to endure the tension any longer. Enjoy your evening, she said lightly, her mask unbroken. She walked out into the humid night, her chest heaving. As soon as the bar's lights faded behind her, Rachel pressed a hand to her mouth, stifling a sob. Anger, disbelief, heartbreak, all of it surged in her veins. He had been here all along. He had chosen this life, chosen to disappear, chosen to let her drown in grief while he drank on sunny terraces. Back in her room, Lucas was already asleep, his small frame curled beneath the blanket. Rachel stood at the doorway, tears slipping down her cheeks. She thought of the story she had told him, of the father he was beginning to forget, of the life she had tried to build on ashes. And now, with one glance at a familiar mole, it all threatened to collapse. The storm inside her raged, a desperate urge to confront him, to scream, to demand answers, clashing with a terrified instinct to protect the fragile peace she had built. For 3 years, she had lived with a ghost. Now the ghost had a body, a voice, and eyes that had almost recognized her. The following afternoon, Rachel tried to distract herself by taking Lucas down to the beach. The boy splashed happily near the shoreline, building towers of wet sand that collapsed and reformed with each new wave. Rachel sat beneath a wide umbrella, sunglasses shielding her eyes, but her mind refused to settle. Every laugh from Lucas was a blessing, but beneath it her pulse hammered with the weight of the night before. She had seen Victor, spoken to him, however indirectly. There was no denying it anymore. As the sun rose higher, heat shimmered across the sand. Rachel shaded her eyes, scanning the crowd, and then she saw him again. Victor was stumbling along the water's edge, a drink still clutched loosely in his hand, his shirt half unbuttoned. He looked worn, exhausted, yet unmistakably alive. She wanted to look away, to shield herself from the sight, but she couldn't. Moments later it happened. He faltered, staggered, and collapsed onto the sand. The glass slipped from his hand, shattering harmlessly against the wet ground. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then instinct overtook Rachel. She bolted from under the umbrella, sprinting across the sand before she had time to remember her plan to stay hidden. "Sir, are you all right?" A passerby called out, but Rachel was already kneeling beside him. She rolled him gently onto his back. His skin was hot to the touch, his breath shallow, his lips dry and cracked. Heat stroke, alcohol. Her mind snapped through the possibilities. Without thinking, she brushed damp hair away from his forehead. His eyelids fluttered. His gaze, hazy and unfocused, landed on her face. For a moment, confusion reigned. Then recognition struck. His eyes widened, his breath caught. Rachel! The sound of her name on his lips was like a thunderclap. She froze, caught between the urge to run and the impossibility of leaving. Her hands trembled as she steadied him. "Stay still," she managed, voice shaking. Around them, hotel staff rushed over. A lifeguard radioed for paramedics. Within minutes, 2 uniformed EMTs arrived, kneeling beside them with practiced efficiency. One checked his pulse, the other unrolled medical supplies. "Ma'am, we'll take it from here," one said firmly. Rachel nodded, stepping back on unsteady legs. Yet Victor's eyes never left her. Even as the medics lifted him onto a stretcher, his hand reached out weakly, fingers stretching toward her as if to confirm she was real. She backed away, her heart tearing in 2 directions. She wanted to vanish into the crowd, to protect the fragile life she had built. But she also knew the damage was done. He had seen her. He knew. That evening, after Lucas had fallen asleep in their hotel room, a knock sounded on the door. Rachel's stomach clenched. She opened it only a crack, and there he stood, cleaned up, sober, but still pale from the incident. His eyes burned into hers with desperation. "Rachel, please," he whispered. "I need to talk to you." She tried to shut the door, but his hand pressed gently against it, not forceful, just pleading. "I know you don't owe me a second, but I beg you, give me one chance to explain." Her voice was ice. "Explain what, Victor? That you let me grieve you for 3 years? That you let your son grow up believing his father was dead?" His face crumpled. "Please, not here. Not like this. Just give me tonight. Let me tell you everything." Rachel's heart pounded. Every instinct screamed to slam the door, to protect Lucas from the storm that had just ripped through her life again. But something inside her, the part that needed answers, closure, truth, hesitated. She exhaled slowly, her grip on the door loosening. One conversation. "Tonight, after Lucas is asleep. You owe me that much." Relief washed over his face. He nodded quickly. "Thank you. I'll wait by the bar at 9. Rachel shut the door, leaning against it as her knees threatened to give way. She turned toward the bed where Lucas slept peacefully, his small chest rising and falling with innocence that had already endured too much. Her reflection in the darkened window startled her. She looked older, harder, her eyes lined with exhaustion and fire. Tonight, she would face the man who had destroyed her world, and there would be no more hiding. The bar was quiet that night, its usual hum softened by the ocean breeze drifting through open doors. Most guests had retired, leaving only a handful of travelers nursing late drinks. Rachel slipped into the dimly lit room, every step heavy with dread. At a corner table, Victor sat waiting, a glass of water untouched before him. His posture was rigid, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made it impossible to turn away. She approached slowly, each footstep echoing in her chest. Sliding into the chair across from him, she kept her arms folded tightly, a shield against the storm she knew was coming. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Victor leaned forward, voice low, steady, almost rehearsed. "I never died, Rachel. 3 years ago I staged it. I let everyone believe I was gone." Her breath caught, though the truth was already written in his presence. Hearing it aloud sliced through her like glass. She stared at him, her face pale, her voice sharp. "Why? Why would you do that to me? To Lucas?" He swallowed hard, his hands trembling as they closed around the glass he hadn't touched. "I was drowning in debt. Not just money owed to banks or colleagues. This was different. Dangerous. I borrowed from the wrong people, Rachel. Men you can't negotiate with. Men who don't care if a family gets caught in the crossfire. When they came for me, I panicked. If I didn't disappear, they would have found you and Lucas too. Rachel's jaw tightened. So, you let your family think you were dead instead? You let your son grow up fatherless. Your wife bury you in her heart. You thought that was protection. Victor pressed his palms to his temples, his voice breaking. You don't understand the threats. They followed me, they knew where we lived. I thought if I vanished completely, you'd be safe. The accident in Norway, it wasn't an accident. It was my plan. I chose that location because the ice breaks easily in spring. I left evidence behind, a broken snowmobile, a false trail. I paid someone to make it look convincing. And when the authorities gave up the search, I knew it had worked. Rachel's stomach churned. She remembered the phone calls, the officials declaring there was no chance of survival, the endless tears. It had all been orchestrated. Her voice rose, trembling with fury. You watched me suffer. You let me sign papers, explain to our child that his father was gone forever, while you hid like a coward. His eyes glistened, but he didn't look away. I hid because I thought it was the only way to keep you alive. If I had dragged you into hiding with me, they would have hunted us down. At least this way, you and Lucas could live in peace. I sacrificed myself to save you. Rachel slammed her hands on the table, the sound startling the few patrons nearby. Don't you dare call it a sacrifice. Sacrifice is staying and fighting for your family, not running away and pretending to drown. You abandoned us, Victor. You abandoned me. Victor's voice cracked, his defenses slipping. Do you think I didn't hate myself every day? Do you think I didn't picture Lucas's face at night, wondering what he thought of me? I lived in shadows, Rachel. New names, fake passports, cash under the table. I couldn't call, couldn't write, couldn't risk even a whisper of contact. Every day was punishment. She stared at him, her fury giving way to something colder, sharper. Punishment? No. Punishment is what you left me with. Raising our son alone, lying to him every day because I couldn't bear to tell him the truth. I grieved you, Victor. I mourned you as if you were in the ground. And all the while, you were alive, choosing someone else, choosing another life. Victor looked down, shame etched into every line of his face. His voice was barely audible. I wasn't faithful, Rachel. Not then, not now. I tried to fill the void with someone else. But nothing erased what I'd done. Nothing erased you. Her body went cold, the confirmation striking like a final blow. She had suspected, felt it in her bones. But hearing him admit it made the betrayal complete. Not only had he faked his death, but he had sought comfort in another woman while she drowned in grief. You didn't just leave me, Rachel whispered, her throat tight. You erased me. You erased Lucas. And for what? To run, to drink, to hide behind lies? You didn't save us, Victor. You destroyed us. He reached across the table, desperate, but she recoiled as if his touch burned. Rachel, please. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need you to believe me. I did it to protect you. It was never about abandoning you. Her laugh was hollow, sharp as broken glass. Protecting us would have been staying. Protecting us would have been honesty. You chose fear over family. You chose yourself. Victor's face crumpled, his shoulders sagging. The man who once strode through life with confidence now looked small, broken. But Rachel felt no pity. Instead, a cold clarity settled in her chest. For years, she had lived with grief, haunted by the ghost of her husband. Now the ghost sat before her, flesh and blood, and she realized the truth was worse than death. Death had been final, cruel, but unchangeable. This betrayal was ongoing, deliberate, chosen. Rachel rose from the table, her voice steady despite the storm in her veins. I lost you once, Victor. I won't lose myself again. Whatever excuses you tell yourself, know this. You didn't die 3 years ago. You killed our marriage instead." She walked away, leaving him in the dim glow of the bar, drowning not in water or debt, but in the truth he could no longer escape. Rachel had barely left the bar when another figure stormed inside. A woman, young and striking, her heels clicking sharply against the tile floor. She wore a fitted dress too bright for the dim space, and her eyes, narrowed with fury, immediately locked on Victor. "Who was that?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough to turn heads. "You were with her, weren't you?" Victor paled, his words stumbling. "Dora, it's not what you think." But she was already glaring toward the doorway where Rachel had disappeared. Spinning on her heel, she charged outside. Rachel, who had paused near the terrace to gather her breath, suddenly found herself face to face with the young woman. "You," Dora spat, her words dripping with venom. "What are you doing with my man? Can't you find someone your own age?" Rachel stood still, the sting of insult washing over her and sliding off like rain. She had been through too much to flinch at childish cruelty. Her eyes, cool and steady, met Dora's. "Your man," she said quietly. "Funny, that man is my husband." Dora blinked, taken aback for only a second, before laughing bitterly. "Nice try. He told me his wife died years ago. Don't think you can play games with me." Rachel's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Her voice, however, was steady, sharp, impossible to ignore. "He didn't tell you the truth. 3 years ago, Victor Morgan faked his death. He left his wife, me, and his 5-year-old son behind to mourn him. He let us believe he was gone while he ran away to chase whatever life he thought he deserved. That's the man you're clinging to." Dora's face went pale, the confidence draining from her features. She glanced over her shoulder at Victor, who had followed them out, his expression stricken. "Victor, is this true?" He reached out, desperate. "Dora, please. I can explain." But the young woman shook her head, stepping back as if his touch might contaminate her. "Explain? How do you explain abandoning a child? Letting your wife think you were dead? You told me you were free, that your past was behind you." Victor's mouth opened, but no sound came. The silence stretched, damning him more than words ever could. Dora's eyes filled with disgust. "You're pathetic. I thought you were strong, mysterious. But you're just a coward hiding behind lies." With that, she turned and stormed away, her footsteps echoing like a final verdict. Victor reached after her, calling her name, but she didn't look back. He was left standing in the open air, shoulders hunched, face drawn in anguish. Rachel watched it unfold with an eerie calm. Once, the sight of her husband being abandoned might have broken her heart, might have driven her to tears. But not now. Her eyes were dry, her chest hollow yet steady. What she felt was not grief, but release, a bitter, satisfying clarity. For 3 years, she had been chained to the ghost of Victor Morgan. Tonight, she saw him stripped of every pretense. Not a victim, not a hero, but a man undone by his own choices. And for the first time since his disappearance, she realized she didn't need to cry anymore. She turned away, her voice low but cutting as she passed him. "You've finally lost everything, Victor. And this time, you did it all by yourself." Without another glance, Rachel walked back toward the hotel. The night air wrapped around her like a cloak, heavy but liberating. Behind her, Victor's world collapsed piece by piece. But ahead, hers was finally, painfully, slowly beginning to rebuild. 2 days after the confrontation at the bar, Rachel found herself sitting on a bench in a quiet park near the resort. The late afternoon sun cast long golden shadows across the stone paths, and the sound of children's laughter drifted from a playground nearby. She hadn't planned this meeting, but when Victor had slipped a note under her door, "Please, one last chance to talk," she had agreed. Against her better judgment, perhaps, but she wanted closure. Victor arrived slowly, almost cautiously, as if each step toward her might shatter what little remained between them. His face was drawn, his eyes tired, and the confident man she had once known seemed replaced by someone defeated. He stopped a few feet away, unsure if he was welcome. Rachel didn't tell him to leave, so he sat at the far end of the bench, leaving space between them. "Rachel," he began, his voice strained, "I know I've lost you. I saw it in your eyes the other night. But please at least let me see Lucas. He's my son. I can't undo what I've done, but I can try to be a father again." Rachel stared straight ahead, watching a boy push his little sister on a swing. She thought of Lucas, safe in the hotel with a sitter, unaware of this meeting. Her voice, when it came, was quiet but firm. "Lucas deserves to know his father. I won't keep you from him, but don't mistake that for forgiveness. You and I were finished." Victor flinched as if struck. "I thought maybe if I explained, if you saw how desperate I was, you'd understand." She turned to him then, her eyes clear, her tone sharp. "Understand what? That you chose fear over us? That you let me drown in grief while you built a new life?" "Victor, there is no explanation that makes that right." He dropped his gaze to the ground, his hands twisting together. I know I don't deserve you, but I can change. I can make it right for Lucas. I can't lose both of you." Rachel studied him, her heart waging a silent war. Part of her saw the man she had once loved, the man who had made her laugh, who had held her hand through childbirth, who had promised forever. That part ached, whispering of what might have been if fear hadn't consumed him. But the other part, stronger now, remembered the lies, the abandonment, the nights of tears, the years of raising their son alone. That love had withered, leaving only a scar. "You already lost me," she said softly, "but you haven't lost Lucas. He's still young enough to know you if you try. Don't waste that chance. Don't make him another casualty of your cowardice." Victor's shoulders slumped, relief mingling with sorrow. "Thank you," he whispered. "That's more than I deserve." Silence stretched between them, filled with the rustle of leaves and the distant call of seabirds. Rachel felt strangely calm, though her chest ached. She realized she wasn't angry anymore, not in the way she had been. The rage had burned itself out, leaving behind something steadier, resolve. "You know what the hardest part is?" she asked suddenly. Victor looked at her, waiting. Her voice wavered, but she held steady. "It's not that you faked your death. It's not even that you cheated. It's that when life got hard, you didn't trust me enough to face it together. You decided for both of us that I'd be better off without you. That arrogance, it cut deeper than anything else." Victor opened his mouth, but no words came. His silence was its own confession. Rachel stood, brushing the sand from her skirt. "This is the last time we'll speak like this. From now on, it's about Lucas. You can see him. You can try to be a father. But you and I, we are done." Her words were final, carrying a weight that could not be undone. For years, she had felt small in his shadow, crushed under grief and unanswered questions. But now she felt taller, stronger. She was not the woman who had sobbed over a phone call declaring her husband dead. She was someone new, someone who could survive betrayal and still stand. Victor remained on the bench, staring at the ground, his figure small against the expanse of the park. Rachel walked away, her step steady, her heart heavy but certain. For the first time in years, she knew where she stood. She had set her boundary, carved it deep, and nothing would move it again. The following afternoon, Rachel brought Lucas down to the beach. The sky stretched wide and endless, a brilliant blue reflected in the rolling waves. Tourists wandered the shoreline. Children darted in and out of the surf, their laughter mixing with the rhythm of the sea. Rachel held her son's hand tightly as they approached a familiar figure waiting near the water's edge. Victor stood there, his posture tense, his eyes locked on the boy beside her. He looked smaller than Rachel remembered, weighed down by the choices that had shattered their family. Lucas shifted uncertainly, glancing from his mother to the man who had once been the center of his world and was now little more than a faint memory. "Lucas," Rachel said gently, kneeling to meet his gaze, "this is your father." The boy studied Victor for a long moment, his brow furrowed. Then, slowly, a tentative smile spread across his face. "Dad," he whispered, the word fragile, testing. Victor's eyes filled with tears. He crouched down, holding his arms open but not daring to move closer. "Yes, buddy, it's me." Lucas hesitated, then took a step forward. When Victor pulled him into a hug, the boy stiffened, uncertain, before relaxing just enough to let himself be held. Rachel watched, her throat tightening. It was both beautiful and painful to see, the reunion her son deserved, yet one built on years that could never be reclaimed. For the next hour, they stayed near the shoreline, the three of them together, but not as they once had been. Lucas showed Victor how he built sandcastles, proudly pointing out towers and walls, his small hands working quickly. Victor listened, laughed, and helped scoop sand, though the awkwardness never fully faded. It was the joy of a child meeting his father, mixed with the strangeness of meeting a stranger. Rachel sat a few feet away, watching quietly. The wind tangled her hair, the waves lapped at her feet, and she felt a complicated swell of emotions. She was glad Lucas had this moment. A child deserved to know where he came from, to see his father not as a ghost, but as a man of flesh and bone. But she also knew this scene was not a restoration. It was a fragile arrangement, one that could never return to what it once was. Victor glanced toward her more than once, eyes pleading, as if hoping to catch even the faintest spark of forgiveness. Rachel met his gaze each time with calm finality, her heart no longer twisted in longing. Instead, it stood firm in clarity. She could not erase what he had done. She could not love him again. As the sun began to sink, painting the horizon in shades of gold and crimson, Rachel stood. "Lucas," she called softly, "it's time to go." The boy frowned, reluctant. "But we just got here." Rachel smiled, brushing sand from his hair. "We'll have more time tomorrow. Come on." Victor helped dust him off, then stood awkwardly as though searching for words. "Thank you," he said finally, his voice directed at Rachel, "for letting me see him." She nodded, nothing more. Then she took Lucas's hand and turned toward the path leading back to the hotel. Victor remained behind, his figure silhouetted against the glowing horizon, a man surrounded by the ruins of his own making. As Rachel walked across the cooling sand, her chest rose with a long, steady breath. The weight that had bound her for years, the grief, the betrayal, the unanswered questions, lifted with each step. She felt the sting of tears, but they were not tears of sorrow. They were the tears of release. Lucas skipped beside her, chatting about seashells and sandcastles, his voice bright and innocent. Rachel squeezed his hand, anchoring herself in the present. She no longer lived in the shadow of a man who had abandoned her. She lived for her son, for herself, for the future she was strong enough to claim. At the edge of the beach, she paused and turned her gaze once more toward the horizon. Victor's figure was distant now, swallowed by the fading light. She exhaled, a quiet sigh of finality. Rachel Morgan had been broken once, left to grieve a husband she thought she lost. But she had risen. She had carried her child through the storm. And now, walking away from the past, she knew she was no longer bound to the man who betrayed her. She was her own woman, strong, unshaken, and free. "I had to let it go," I told myself, staring at the locked bathroom door while my 7-year-old son wheezed through another coughing fit on the couch. It's just a missed interview, not the end of the world. But it was the end of the world, our world, because that promotion was the one shot I had at pulling us out of survival mode. And I'd planned everything down to the minute, until my mother said she couldn't help. Not for 2 hours, not even for her grandson. "My name is Rachel Mendez. I'm 31, a single mom living in Pasadena with my son Leo. His father moved to Oregon when Leo was 2 and hasn't looked back since. A birthday card with $20, maybe a text at Christmas if I'm lucky. That's the extent of his contribution. So it's been just me and Leo side by side ever since. I work full-time as an administrative coordinator at a logistics firm. It's not glamorous and it barely covers rent, asthma meds, and after-school care, but it's steady. And for the past 6 months, I've been grinding, taking on extra projects, staying late, saying yes to every damn thing in hopes of being promoted to operations coordinator. That promotion came with a raise big enough to let me breathe. No more grocery lists filtered through my bank balance. No more sleepless nights over school fees or expired inhalers. And last Monday, my manager finally told me the interview was set, Friday, 2 p.m. I had a plan. Leo would be at school. I'd take a long lunch, ace the interview, and be back by 3:30 like nothing happened. But by Wednesday night, the plan unraveled. Leo started coughing, not just the usual dry kind. This was the deep, seal-like bark that always meant trouble. I checked his forehead, 101.3. I knew that cough. I knew what came next. By Thursday morning, he was flushed and groggy, and I was canceling meetings to take him to the pediatrician. Sure enough, steroid prescription, strict bed rest, no school for at least 48 hours. When we got home, I tucked him in, set up his humidifier, and sat on the edge of the couch, phone in hand. I didn't want to call her, but I had no choice. My parents live about 30 minutes away in Glendale, in the same house I grew up in. My dad's retired. My mom, Carolyn, hasn't worked in years, unless you count Pilates, hair appointments, and planning her book club's wine pairings. They go to their lake cabin most weekends and post brunch selfies like they're in their 20s. They're not cruel people, just emotionally unavailable, selectively generous. But in true emergencies, they've helped before. Once when Leo had the flu, my dad came and sat with him while I ran to CVS. Another time, my mom picked him up from school when his bus was delayed. That's why I hoped, this might be one of those moments. I called. She picked up on the 3rd ring. "Mom," I said, my voice low. "Leo's sick. I have my promotion interview tomorrow at 2. I just need someone to be here for 2 hours while I'm gone. I'll prep everything. He'll be on the couch watching cartoons. You won't need to do much." She cut me off with a sigh I've heard my whole life. "Oh, honey, this weekend isn't good. Your father and I are going to the Williams anniversary party on Saturday, and I've got my hair appointment Friday. You know how these things are." I paused. "It's just 2 hours, Mom. This promotion, this could change everything for Leo and me." Another pause. Then, "Well, maybe this is a sign you need to reevaluate your priorities as a mother." I blinked, like I'd been slapped. I said nothing, just hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. I called everyone else. Friends, neighbors, parents from Leo's school. But with such short notice and the words sick and asthma floating around, no one could help. I left a voicemail with Juliet in HR, asking if we could reschedule. I knew it was a long shot. Friday morning, I got the email. Andrew's schedule was packed. Decision had to be made by Tuesday. Interview Friday or not at all. That was the message. So I made a different choice. I stayed home. At 2 p.m., instead of walking into the interview room, I was spooning soup into Leo's mouth while watching reruns of Magic School Bus. He was tired. He was pale. He didn't know I'd just given up the job I'd been working toward for half a year. And I didn't let him see me cry. Saturday morning, I got a text from my mother. "We're heading to the Williams party. You and Leo should come by for dinner tomorrow. I'm making pot roast." As if nothing had happened. As if she hadn't looked me in the eye, figuratively, and told me that her blowout and brunch plans mattered more than my son's care or my entire career trajectory. I stared at the message for a full minute, then turned my phone face down on the table. The next morning, I called her. Leo was watching cartoons in the background, bundled up on the couch with his favorite blanket. My voice was calm. Too calm. "We're not coming for dinner," I said. "I'm still hurt, Mom. You knew how important that interview was, and you still said no." Her voice on the other end, equal parts defensive and dismissive. "You can't expect me to drop everything every time you have a little crisis, Rachel. I raised you. Now you're raising Leo. That's how it works." I swallowed. It wasn't a little crisis. I've barely asked you for anything in the last 4 years, maybe 5 times, but I show up for you, constantly. The TV setup last Christmas, taking Dad to his PT appointments, helping move your furniture, fixing your router when it crashed the night before your wine night. She cut me off. Those are just things family does. I was shaking, not just from anger, but from the weight of finally realizing that this conversation had been years in the making. "I think I need some space," I said quietly. "And I can't help financially right now either." That's when her tone shifted. "What?" "Well, we were hoping you could help out this month. Your father's medication costs went up, and the property tax deadline's coming up. Of course. Of course." In the same breath where she refused to acknowledge how her refusal had hurt me, she was asking for money I no longer had because of her. "I lost the promotion, Mom," I said, my voice flat. "There's no extra money this month. And honestly, I need to stop putting myself last just to make things easier for everyone else." She muttered something about how families are supposed to support each other. I hung up. Monday morning, I got the official email. The position had gone to someone else. I sat in my car during lunch and cried. Not silent, graceful tears, but the kind where your shoulders shake and you can't breathe through your nose. Then I wiped my face, walked back into the office, and trained the guy who got the job. Ronnie, fresh out of undergrad, polite, apologetic, said things like, "You totally had this down." I nodded, showed him how to set up the inventory logs, and tried not to break again. Over the next few days, the texts kept coming. "When will you send over your part for Dad's prescription? The lawn service just raised their rate again. Can you chip in? Don't forget what we've done for you over the years." What they had done for me. They'd raised me, yes. Fed me, clothed me, drove me to school and piano practice. All things parents should do. All things I do now for Leo without keeping a ledger. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Every message felt like a paper cut across a bruise. Then came the kicker. "We're family, Rachel. Don't forget that. You owe us." I remember staring at that last message for a long time, the word "oh" ringing louder than anything else. That was it. That was the core of it, wasn't it? My entire adult life had been built around this invisible debt they believed I carried. And I'd been paying interest on it for years, emotionally, financially, spiritually. That night, after Leo fell asleep, I opened my notes app and typed a message I knew I needed to send. It was short. It was clear. It ended with, "I won't be able to help financially or otherwise for the foreseeable future. I need you to respect that." Their reply came the next morning. "We're family. We're supposed to help each other." Yes, we are. But apparently that only applies when they need something from me. They went quiet for exactly 3 days. Not a word. No texts. No guilt-tripping calls. No surprise visits. For a brief moment, I wondered, hoped, that maybe they were reflecting. Maybe they were finally understanding. Maybe space was what we all needed. That illusion shattered on Tuesday evening. I was making box mac and cheese for dinner, Leo's favorite, with hot dog slices cut into little moons. He was sitting at the kitchen table, coloring planets for his solar system project. He'd been chosen to be Jupiter, the biggest one. He was proud of that. I was starting to smile again until my phone buzzed. It was from my mother. No greeting, no apology, just a screenshot of a credit card bill. $4,378.62. No explanation, just numbers circled in red. I stared at it while the cheese powder turned to paste in the pot. 20 minutes later, another message. "We need help with this by Friday or the interest will go up." I put the phone down and stirred the noodles, barely registering the smell of scorched milk. I'd seen this pattern before. The emergency that always turned out to be something optional, indulgent, or preventable. The ski trip after the tight Christmas. The new car audio system that followed the emergency brake repair. I dipped into my already strained savings more times than I could count because they framed every ask as dire and every refusal as betrayal. But not this time. That night, while Leo brushed his teeth, I opened my laptop and applied to 3 new jobs. Administrative roles, some hybrid, some remote. Nothing fancy, just something stable. The missed promotion had been a slap in the face, a reminder that loyalty means nothing if you're invisible. The next morning, I woke up to 3 missed calls from my dad and a voicemail. "Hi, honey," his voice said low and tight. "Call us back. This is important. Your mother's very upset." Of course she was. I didn't call. Instead, I replied to their earlier text. As I said, I can't help financially right now. Then I turned my phone on silent and took Leo to school. That afternoon, my mom sent a follow-up text, this time with a detailed explanation, or what she framed as one. She claimed the credit card debt was mostly from helping me and Leo. I stared at that message, so long my coffee went cold. Then I opened my banking app and scrolled through the past year. Let's see. A $30 Target gift card for Leo's birthday. 1 dinner at Applebee's with a BOGO coupon they mentioned 3 separate times. Hand-me-down clothes from my cousin's kid that didn't fit. In contrast, I'd sent them $800 when their water heater failed. I'd spent over $200 for Dad's birthday gift last July, a new golf rangefinder. I'd driven them to appointments, helped them switch internet providers, and set up Mom's new iPad after she said the Apple Store gave her a headache. But apparently, I was the one draining them financially. That night, I trained Ronnie on a few more processes. He was polite, still awkward, and kept saying things like, "They should have waited for your interview. You clearly had all of this down." I smiled through it. It wasn't his fault. But hearing that over and over again felt like someone was rubbing lemon juice into an open cut. During lunch, my phone buzzed again, this time with a number I didn't recognize. Thinking it might be from one of the jobs I applied to, I picked up. It wasn't. It was Aunt Lisa, my mom's sister, a woman I spoke to maybe twice a year. She launched straight into a speech. "Rachel, I don't mean to intrude, but your mom's really upset. She says you've cut them off. I just wanted to check in and see if everything's okay. Family should stick together," I tried to explain. I mentioned Leo's asthma, the promotion, the missed opportunity, the years of one-sided help. She interrupted. "Well, that's your side. Your mother tells me she's always been there for you." I don't remember how the call ended, only that I stared at my reflection in the office bathroom mirror 15 minutes later and didn't recognize the woman looking back. My eyes were tired, my shoulders slumped, but underneath the exhaustion, something stronger was forming. I Googled, "signs your parents are manipulative," and what I found felt like reading my own diary. Weaponized guilt, rewriting history, withholding affection when boundaries are enforced, making every ask seem like life or death. Suddenly, everything clicked. This wasn't just a rough patch. It was a cycle I'd been conditioned to accept since childhood. The job offer came on a quiet Thursday afternoon. I was sitting at my desk, eating a granola bar, answering emails with half my attention when my phone rang. A woman named Danielle from a mid-sized logistics firm in Burbank wanted to schedule an interview. The role was similar to mine, but with better pay, actual benefits, and a hybrid schedule. 3 days in office, 2 remote. My breath caught. I scheduled the interview for the following Tuesday. Plenty of time to arrange childcare. Thanks to Juliet from next door, who'd offered to help. Whenever you need, seriously. For the first time in weeks, I let myself exhale. That evening, after I picked Leo up from school and started heating up leftovers, my phone buzzed with a notification from my apartment building's resident portal. A request had been submitted to add 2 people, my parents, to my approved visitor list. I declined the request immediately and called the property manager, Ariana, to make sure there was no misunderstanding. "There's something else," she said, voice cautious. "Your mother came by earlier, said she needed to drop off Leo's medication. When I reminded her she wasn't on the list and that you'd explicitly denied access, she got defensive." "What did she say exactly?" I asked. That as Leo's grandmother, she had rights. I thanked Ariana for standing firm and hung up with a knot tightening in my stomach. When I got home, I checked every lock, closed every blind, something I never usually did. Leo asked if we were playing a hiding game. I told him we were just making the apartment extra cozy tonight. We ordered pizza and built a blanket fort in the living room. He picked How to Train Your Dragon, and halfway through the second act, just as Toothless leapt off the cliff, a knock sounded at the door. I knew immediately. I told Leo to keep watching and stepped out, carefully closing the door behind me. They were both standing there, my mother with her oversized purse, my father with a rolling suitcase and a grocery bag that looked like it had been hastily packed. His face wore that hopeful, coaxing smile I'd seen too many times. My mother's eyes were puffy but calculating. "We thought this made more sense," Dad said, gesturing toward the hallway. "Your place is closer to our doctor's, and there's more room." "There's not more room," I replied. "It's a 1-bedroom apartment, Dad. Leo and I already share a space. And this isn't about square footage. You're not staying here." My mother's voice was quiet at first, just until things get sorted out. "A few days. That's all." "What things?" I asked. "You have a house. A paid-off house." She hesitated. "There's been a misunderstanding with the mortgage company. Our utilities were shut off because of a clerical error." I didn't laugh, but I wanted to. "You drove 30 minutes with luggage, but couldn't call first." "Our phones are about to be disconnected," she said quickly. "You texted me yesterday," I said. "From the same number." She flinched. "Go to a hotel," I said flatly. "Use the credit card you sent me a screenshot of. Or go stay with Aunt Lisa. She has a guest room." My mother's eyes narrowed. "So you're abandoning your own parents, when we have nowhere to go." "You're not homeless," I said, keeping my voice even. "You have a car, a credit card, a guest room 10 miles away." My dad changed tactics. "Leo's birthday is next month. Wouldn't it be sad if we couldn't come? No gifts, no celebration. Living in our car, the manipulation was so transparent, I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. "I'm going back inside," I said. "Leo doesn't need to hear any of this. I suggest you head to Aunt Lisa's before it gets too late." As I turned, my mother said something that made me pause. "We'll see what the police have to say about a daughter turning away her elderly parents with nowhere to go." I stopped, looked her dead in the eye. "You're not elderly. You're 61 and 63. You're not incapacitated. You're not destitute. You're choosing this path because..." I finally said no. Neither of them responded. My dad shifted his feet. My mother pressed her lips together in a tight, self-righteous line. I closed the door, locked it. Then I climbed back into the fort where Leo was now curled up under a blanket, eyes sleepy. "Was that Grandma and Grandpa?" he asked. "They just stopped by to say hi," I said softly. "They had to go to Aunt Lisa's." He nodded and went back to watching dragons soar through the sky, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking for the rest of the night. They knocked twice more that night, once around 9:30 p.m. and again closer to midnight. I didn't open the door. I watched them leave through the peephole, suitcases dragging behind them, my mother muttering something as she climbed into the passenger seat. The next morning, I woke up to a new group text from my mother. It included me, my brother David, Aunt Lisa, 2 cousins I barely spoke to, and a few other family members. The message read, "Please share this with anyone who might care." Below, it was a link to a GoFundMe titled, "Help 2 seniors stay in their home." The description was vague. unexpected medical issues, rising costs, facing possible homelessness. Anything helps. Their goal? $155,000. There were no details. No mention of the years of reckless spending, the cruises, the new appliances, the elective home renovations. Just carefully framed victimhood. I didn't reply. David called me 30 seconds later. "Did you see this crap?" he asked. I did. They own their home. Or at least they did. "They took out a home equity line," I said, quietly. "They never told us." "Are they actually broke?" "No. They're panicking and weaponizing sympathy." He sighed. "You think we should do something?" "I already did," I said. "I said no. That's something." That night, after Leo went to bed, I scrolled through the comments on the GoFundMe. Most were from strangers, people sharing prayers or words like, "No one should lose their home in retirement." A few donations trickled in, $10 here, $25 there. Nothing close to the goal, but the narrative was spreading, and the guilt was being distributed like wildfire. The next morning, Ariana from the front office called again. "I'm so sorry to bother you," she said, "but your parents came by the building again." My stomach dropped. "Did they get in?" "No. They said they needed to drop off Leo's medication. I reminded them you denied access. Your mother got insistent." My voice shook. "Did she threaten anyone?" "Not exactly, but she said she'd be back Saturday. Said she knew you'd be home." That night, I barely slept. On Saturday, Leo and I stayed inside all day. I told him it was a rainy day, even though the sun was shining. We built another blanket fort. Ordered Chinese takeout. I tried to act normal. At 7:48 p.m., they knocked. This time they had 2 additional bags. My dad smiled like we were old friends bumping into each other. My mother looked directly past me into the apartment. "I'm sorry," I said. "You can't be here." "We just need a few nights," Dad started. "No," my mother's tone turned sharp. "We're your parents. We took care of you for 18 years. And for the last 12, I've been taking care of you," I snapped. "Financially, emotionally, logistically, I've given more than I ever got. And the moment I needed help, you chose a haircut over your grandson." She opened her mouth, but I didn't give her the chance. "Go back to Lisa's, or a hotel. This is my home, not your backup plan." I closed the door. This time I didn't shake. Later that night, after Leo was asleep, my phone buzzed again. A new email. The subject line, "Final tally." It was from my dad. Inside was a spreadsheet. Dozens of rows. Clothing, food, medical appointments, school field trips. Every basic parental duty listed with a dollar value. At the bottom, total load, $197,485. There was even a section for emotional labor marked at $40,000. I stared at the screen, numb. Not angry, not even surprised, just tired. The next day, I printed the email and added it to the folder. The same folder where I kept screenshots, texts, call logs. And then I wrote a letter, certified mail, addressed to both of them. Any further attempts to contact me directly or access Leo without permission would result in legal action. It broke my heart to write it, but it broke something deeper to need it in the first place. It's been just over 6 months since they stood at my door with their luggage, asking for sanctuary under the guise of desperation. A lot has changed since then, most of it quietly, some of it permanently. Leo and I moved to a 2-bedroom apartment a few miles away, still in the same school district. It's nothing fancy, but it's ours. The first night we slept there, Leo got to pick his own bedding. He chose planets, of course. Jupiter front and center. The water pressure actually lasts longer than 5 minutes. The fridge doesn't hum like it's dying. These small things feel enormous when you've spent years juggling duct tape and anxiety. I started my new job 5 months ago. It's not glamorous, but it's solid. The The promised flexibility is real. When Leo had another asthma flare-up in April, I worked from home for 3 days. No guilt trips, no awkward silences, just support. My new manager, Douglas, has kids. He gets it. We're not rich. But I don't wake up at 3 a.m. anymore wondering if I have to choose between groceries and medicine. That kind of peace? I didn't know it was allowed. As for my parents, silence, mostly. At first, they tried everything: group texts, voicemails, even a birthday card for Leo signed from the grandparents who never stopped loving you. But when I didn't respond, they turned to what David calls the family PR tour. Suddenly, I was the villain in every relative's inbox. Aunt Lisa called, then my cousin Michelle, then my dad's bowling buddy of all people, all echoing the same line. They're struggling, Rachel. Can't you just talk to them? But something had shifted in me. Not just boundaries, but the belief that I was finally allowed to have them. I started therapy around that time. My new insurance covers it. My therapist, Dina, is calm, curious, and terrifyingly insightful. She helped me trace the patterns I couldn't name before. The way I was taught to believe love must be earned, that saying no was betrayal, that being useful was the only way to be worthy. The real turning point, though, came in March. Leo's school called me. Someone had come to pick him up, claimed it was for a doctor's appointment. I'd forgotten to update his pickup list, so they'd called to confirm. It was my mother. She was in the school parking lot. I dropped everything. When I arrived, she and my dad were sitting in their car, windows rolled down, waving at Leo from a distance. When I confronted them, she said, "We just wanted a little time with our grandson." I handed the school a printed copy of every boundary they'd crossed, every incident documented. They tightened security protocols. I sent my parents a final, certified letter. No contact, no exceptions. Any violation will result in legal consequences. That was the last time they tried anything direct. But it wasn't the end. 2 weeks ago, my dad called. I almost didn't answer, but something in me wanted to know. His voice was different, less performative, more unsure. He told me my mom had started seeing a therapist. After months of getting nowhere with guilt or manipulation, she'd had a health scare, minor but enough to shake her. Her doctor had recommended counseling for stress. She'd been going for 6 weeks. She's learning things, he said, about herself, about the way she treated you. I didn't speak. He didn't ask me for money. He didn't demand forgiveness. He just said they wanted to rebuild slowly on my terms. I told him I'd think about it, and I meant it. Since then, we've exchanged 2 emails. I've sent pictures of Leo, a few school updates. There's been no pressure for more. I'm cautious. Dina says time will tell. Change is easy to claim and hard to prove. And part of me still flinches when I see my mom's name pop up on my screen. But there's something else too, a kind of quiet. Not peace exactly, but space. Space to be a mother, a worker, a woman who isn't constantly pulled in 8 directions by ghosts of obligation. Leo still asks about them sometimes. I tell him the truth, gently. That love is real, even when people make hurtful choices. That it's okay to love someone and still keep your distance. That being family means showing up, not just saying the word. And when he asked if Grandma would be at his birthday party next month, I told him, not this year, maybe one day. And I meant that too.